Hello and welcome to the Right Book Company Author Talk. Today I'm delighted to welcome Neil Munz-Jones. Neil is a consultant, a coach and a connector. He runs MDJ2, which he founded in 2005, a consulting business that supports leaders who are passionate about their businesses, customers and colleagues to help solve their biggest challenges. MDJ2 focuses on the retail and consumer sections in the UK and across Europe. Neil is also a qualified coach and mentor, working with the next generation of leaders to help them fulfill their potential. And the reason we're here today is that Neil published The Reluctant Networker back in 2010. So he and I go back a long way. He also produced a second edition with us in 2016. Now, since 2010, Neil has been giving inspirational talks to other reluctant networkers. And there are many of them, we know. He does this to help them not only make the most of their networks, but also have fun while doing it. I'm just going to read a little bit from the back that somebody from the Lloyds Banking Group said. The reluctant networker dispels the myths around networking and forces you to confront your own demons about taking the subject seriously and committing to action. Welcome, Neil.
Hello, Sue. How lovely to see you again.
Lovely to see you too. Nice to have you with us.
Yeah, glad to be here, part of your series of author talks.
Yeah, and you asked me earlier if you were one of the earliest published authors that we've had, and you are indeed. And it's lovely that your book is still going strong, and albeit even the second edition is now 7 years, but yeah. Still, The Reluctant Networker is still something that is relevant and something that, you know, you clearly, this is, tell us a little bit. Why don't you start off by telling us a bit about what made you write this book in the first place? Why The Reluctant Networker?
Yeah, there wasn't a grand plan. The plan was basically when I left full-time employment and set up on my own. I set some goals for my 40s. One of which was to run my own consulting company, teach in a business school, and write a book. And for a little while, I was wondering what to write about. And one day, my wife said, "Oh, you should write a book about networking because you've learned a bit about it." So, yeah, as the title of my book suggests, I'm not a natural networker, but I've learnt how to do it. So I thought, oh, I'm not sure there's a book in this, but I just got a little notepad out and started making some notes. And then I interviewed people in my network and just said, well, tell me, you know, what are the stories, what works, what doesn't work. And out of that came, I thought it was enough for a book. And then I remember it well, I was in Waterstones in Piccadilly, and the personal development section is right up on the top floor. So there's a bit of a hike to get up there. But I thought I'll go and have a look and see what other books there are written about networking. And I went through this real emotional sort of curve, up, down, and back up again. And so the down bit was there were about 10 books on networking. So I started to leaf through them thinking, oh my God, you know, what have I got to say that's different to all these other books about networking? And the thing that struck me was they were all written by people who were really good at networking, really natural. And they just reeled off, well, you go to events and you work the room and take your business cards and all this good stuff. And I sort of read it all and I was thinking, yeah, agree. But then, no, that's not really me. And that was where the sort of origins of the reluctant networker came out. And I thought that was my angle. What was different was, I think most people who want to read a book about networking, probably the reluctant networkers, not the natural networkers who just get on and do it anyway and go kind of, what's the fuss? And so I thought, actually, we need to spend a bit of time getting people to think about, it's all about your mindset. And if you have a negative mindset, because there's a couple of very common myths that people come up with. The first one is networking is all about going to events. And I'd rather watch paint dry than go and work a room and don't leave until you've got 20 business cards and 5 follow-up conversations. It all sounds a bit grim. And my sort of observation to that is, well, events are just one way of networking. There's lots of other ways to do it. And the second one is somebody said, oh, it's just a politically correct term for using people to get what you want. And so that somebody said, oh, they use the adjective grubby. It's a bit grubby. And it's true, you go to these events and you get told you've got 30 seconds to do your pitch. And it's all about selling. What have I got to sell to you? And that puts a lot of people off. And so one of my mantras I talk a lot about is start with a relationship and not the transaction. So don't put yourself under pressure to get something out of every conversation. So it feels like, oh, I'm going to an event, I can't leave until I've got this. And so we feel stressed, and then the people we're talking to can pick up on it, and it all just feels very uncomfortable. Whereas I think if you just view this as building relationships, particularly going to events, it's not about selling stuff. It's about getting to know people, maybe seeing people you haven't seen for a while, and building that relationship. And if you build a relationship, then the transaction, whatever that may be, whether it's a job, a piece of work, and some of the benefits I've had from networking have been, my son got a job, his first job through my networking in the pandemic. I've had good book recommendations, been on an amazing city walk in Southampton where we got to go into King John II's vaults where he stored his wine. And that was through a networking group that I'm in. So it's really important. I want people to change their mindset and not feel networking is this tough thing to do. And so I spent a lot of time about that before we get into the tips of what is it that you do.
It's really interesting, and of course, having come from running a very successful consultancy business in the sort of retail sector, you are in fact yourself now transitioning into a more of a coach. And something you said to me earlier, just before we came on air, was this whole area of, I love the way you talk about the connecting the dots. I love the way that you talk about, the relationship building, and how you tell us a little bit about how the networking and the coaching have sort of come together in where you're going to now with your business.
Well, it's actually sort of started with the consulting. That what I've learned is, I set up on my own in 2005. There's 4 of us in our team now full time. We have a nice network of other people that we collaborate with. But all our work comes from recommendation, referral, repeat business. It's all about our network. And so I sort of practice what I preach. It's not, I don't just talk theoretically about networking. I understand now that, without it, if I hadn't become a better networker, I wouldn't be able to do the things that I do now. So I'm sort of passionate in, say, doing it properly, the way I talk about it. And then I guess I found, as though my original goal for writing the book was just write a book, but I've actually found it very rewarding when people come up to me, if they've come to one of my talks and gone, oh, that was really great, because before that I used to think networking was this grubby thing to do, and there's all these other people off networking and I just can't engage with it. Particularly people who've maybe lost their jobs and are trying to find a new role. I find it very personally rewarding if you can help people a little bit. So I think there's been that streak running through, what I like to do. And then, I guess as one gets a bit older and a bit more grey hair and all that, you want to sort of pass on and share some of that. And so I did my coaching qualifications about 5 years ago. And it's been a revelation, the whole sort of psychology 101. I wouldn't claim to be a psychologist, but my background is very rational, logical, strategic. I've got an MBA, worked in banking, and I just didn't understand this whole importance about relationships and how that's what makes the world tick. We're not robots. We've all got brains, we've got emotions, we're in tribes, we're our own worst critic. We have our inner coach, but we also have our inner critic, and there's all this stuff going on in our heads that I was blissfully unaware of for many, many years. And now I listen to what I tell myself a lot more. And when I talk to the people that I coach and mentor, not just the next generation, younger people, there are many people going through the same stuff. And they're just not aware of. We're our own worst enemy. We sort of the self-talk is what's holding us back. It's not other people stopping us doing things. If I look back at my career, I don't think I've got a lot of regrets of things that I haven't done, that I've done, but I have a lot of regrets about things I didn't do because and it was always that I just talked myself out of doing them for whatever reason. I was worried about what other people would think about me, all this stuff. And then one day I had this sort of revelation when actually I think people aren't spending a lot of time thinking about me, they're thinking about themselves. So stop worrying about what other people think about you and just get on and do what you're supposed to do.
Yeah, absolutely. So you now you give talks to groups of people. Who do you speak to about? I mean, what's your purpose when you go out and you talk? You talk about networking. From what I'm getting from everything that you're saying is really what you talk about how to not be frightened to be you and to be going out there and building great relationships with people that you may or may not end up doing business with. Would that be right? And it's part of the networking that you do, but also the speaking that you do about networking. Is that what you're encouraging people to do, or what?
Very much so. So when you're networking in all, and then in the coaching, it's all about understanding who you are. So self-awareness, and then self-acceptance. And then going, I'm okay with who I am. A lot of the coaching that I do is with leaders who perhaps they're more on the introvert side, and they're on the fast track to be promoted, and they have this vision that they have not necessarily even spoken around. All leaders need to be extrovert and dominant and charismatic and all this stuff, and so they feel this, but I'm not really like that. And so there's this sort of awkward thing going on where they're trying to be something that they're not. And it's the same with networking. I think it is just understand who you are. We're all interesting. We've got things to offer. And once you're in that position where you understand and accept yourself, you can then grow without changing. So my whole talk with networking is you don't need to undergo a fundamental personality makeover and become this extrovert person who's pressing the flesh at events. You can be an incredibly effective networker while still being, a reluctant one. And I was introduced to one of the first talks that I did where this lady, she introduced me as a converted reluctant networker. And I thought about it for a bit, and then I said, actually, no, I'm not. I'm still a reluctant networker. That's sort of who I am. The difference is way back, I was an ineffective reluctant networker, and now I'm a very effective one. And so I think, that's a really important message for people, because if you are a bit on the shy introvert side, the thought of going to these events, working the room, pressing the flesh is, is pretty daunting. But you don't need to do that. I don't spend a lot of time going to networking events. I go to a few. They tend to be events where I know people. So it's reconnecting with people I already know, not just meeting complete strangers. But I do an awful lot of networking, but it's one-to-one. And I do it from a place of, look, I am who I am, I'm doing all right in my work, everything's not amazing, but it's not rubbish. Bit of honesty, it's quite refreshing, when you can chat to people and just be yourself. I think that's what forms the connection with people, rather than, I call it, when you meet somebody new, we wear our mask of invincibility, where we've got to pretend that we're perfect, and we assume the other person we're talking to is incredibly successful. We're not quite like that. And it's hard work and it's tiring. And so I think if I know someone well enough that I can let the mask down, that's where you make the real connections. And that's far more valuable than having, 100 connections on LinkedIn that you met, but you don't actually really know them. They don't really know you. If you had a bit of a crisis, would you think of calling them? God, no, you wouldn't. So I talk about having fewer, deeper relationships than having lots of, leave that for the celebrities.
Yeah, nice. I like that. So coming back to the book, you wrote the book because you knew you could, and it obviously was something that had become quite close to your heart, networking. What would you say has happened since you published the book? I know it's a long 13 years since the first edition, but clearly still going strong, and clearly something you're still proud of, and still it's still out there, and you're here talking about it today, which is lovely. What's the book done for you, and how has it developed things I guess in terms of things like the speaking?
I've met a lot of people that I wouldn't have met otherwise. I've helped a lot of people, which I think, so one of the things I try and do now is do more and more talks for students, so sixth formers, university, business schools, so that level. So I have my kind of adult full profession, my talk for when you're already doing the job, but I have a sort of networking light for students, so I don't want to scare them, but just go, look, this is something that's going to be really important for your career. Don't do what I did, which was I didn't do any networking till I was 35. Just start now, and here are 3 simple things that you can do just to get started. So that's hugely rewarding for me, and all my student talks, I don't charge a penny for them. And then I've done some very interesting talks for global corporations. Did one earlier this year with 3 sessions, one in the Americas, one in Europe, one in Asia, and seeing the difference. So when we did the one in Asia, there were a lot of Chinese people, and LinkedIn's banned in China, so we had a lot of talk about WeChat, because WeChat is their life. They pay for things, they chat, they network. So I've learned a lot of stuff from other people. I think it's encouraged me to become a better networker, and as I say, the benefits I've had from so my eldest son came home in lockdown, the first pandemic, graduated from uni, wanted to get a job in sport. There was no sport. I go on BBC Sport about at least 5 times a day for 3 months. I didn't go on BBC Sport. So I had a goal where I thought, well, I was at home, didn't have a lot of work because a lot of our contracts got cancelled. So I did a lot of networking on Zoom, and started with a relationship, didn't get into, I said to my team, it's like, guys, there's no point trying to sell stuff at the minute. all our retail contacts are in panic, they don't want to buy consulting projects, so just make yourself useful. So there was a really interesting webinars on leadership in a crisis, so we watched those and we shared the finding. So it was all about relationship building, and everybody talk about family, I've got my kids to come home, what are they up to, my eldest son is looking for a job, what's he interested in, and sport, marketing and sport, and they go, I know someone at the Football Association, I can make an intro, or the England and Wales Cricket Board. So it was really uplifting. And then at the end of one of these talks with this chap I've known for a few years, we just collaborate, help each other out. He sort of went, well, I'm looking for an intern for my tech startup. He said, it's not sport, but it's marketing. It's only 3 months. Your son's probably not going to find a job in the next 3 months. Would you be interested? And he got the job. He stayed for 15 months. And off the back of that job, he then interviewed at Formula E electric cars in their marketing department. And he's been there for 2 years now.
That's amazing.
And all that experience he got in the tech startup in marketing helped him get the job.
Yeah.
And it's just, so I tell this story to the students because, the nice thing is I didn't go onto that call with I'm going to ask this guy for a job for my son. We just had a nice chat, like you and I are at the moment.
Yeah.
And it just came out because we were talking about kids and what you're up to, and and that's the serendipity of just put yourself out there, when be helpful, be interested, curious, and good things happen. But with the thing with networking, you never know which conversation's going to lead to something. A lot of them lead to nothing. Sometimes they lead to stuff, but it's a year, 5 years, 10 years later. You never know. So that's my message. Don't put yourself under pressure to get something out of every conversation. Just have conversations, be interested, be helpful, and good things will happen.
I think that's brilliant, absolutely fabulous. I mean, I love that. I love the whole idea of that kind of the serendipity of you never know who's going to be in the room that you walk into. And I think the fact that what you've done here with the book is that you've done that. The book is also walking into rooms where you aren't, and so and actually that's giving you the credibility, so people will come and ask you to give the talk about networking to people, and that gives you so much. Gives you lots more opportunities to walk into those rooms, but also, as you say, you have a real desire to help other people and to help all those young people to get their heads around it themselves and have it as a life skill. It's not just something that we learn when we go into business and we have to do. It's about the whole thing of being yourself and building those relationships.
And I think in the digital world that we're living in, and younger people are growing up in, it's even more important than it ever was before, because otherwise everything becomes this transaction online, and actually we're still human beings. And I thought when my kids first got their phones, the irony was the only thing they didn't do with their phones was phone anybody. It was always messaging.
Exactly.
And yet it's all, we're humans. We want to connect with people on a personal level. And so this networking, it's not something just to think about your career. It is primarily about your career. But like my story of our evening city walk in Southampton that I do with my wife, that was a benefit of networking. Nothing to do with work. It was just a really interesting evening that enriched our lives. So you need to kind of look up, but also look out, and don't do, some of these awful networking groups where you do your pitch and it's all about selling and they quantify the referrals, the value of business. There's another approach, which is just to see what happens, and all this good. If you're open-minded and curious, good stuff happens. I don't try and quantify. I can't list all these great benefits, but I've got a few nice stories of the good stuff that's come of it. And at the end of the day, we're humans, and we like to connect, and we want to help and support each other. One of the few good things about the pandemic was I think it helped people to get off the treadmill a bit and just realize what's really important in life. And a lot of that is about relationships and humanity.
And how do you think the book has helped you with that?
As I said, I haven't got lots of specific. I've just, let's say, met a lot of people that I otherwise wouldn't have met. Has led some conversations. It's not harm my consulting business. I guess that I'm a published author, even though what I've written about is nothing to do with my consulting business, but I'm not fussed about that. Yes, if I'd wanted to make more money, I should have written a book about retailing. I didn't. I wrote a book about networking, and that's all good. So I guess it's given me a lot of confidence as well. I've given 60, 70 talks, and to students. I've done them online to these. Say I had to get up at the original, the one for the Asia with the Chinese, they wanted me to talk at 3 a.m. because that was like 10 a.m. Asia time. So I had to get up at 7 a.m. to dial in and give this talk. I've travelled, done some around Europe as well. Been interesting, rich experiences.
These opportunities have come to you partly because of the book, would you say?
Oh, only because of the book. So all the all the talks that I've done about networking, so it's only because somebody's gone.
Neil's the author of
the book. Exactly.
It's brilliant, isn't it, from the point of view of those opening doors? That's fantastic.
As I said, so a lot of the stories in the book are from people in my network. I found you through someone in my network, and every single talk that I have a website. Nobody's messaged me going, "Oh, I found your website. Could you do a talk?" Everyone who's asked me to do a talk, just like every consulting project I've done, it's somebody who knows me or knows somebody I know who they're having a chat and they connect you up. So without a doubt, the book has created all of those opportunities. Otherwise, it definitely gives you credibility if you haven't written a book about it. Who are you to say?
So we've just got a couple of minutes left, Neil. I wonder if there's anything, if you had sort of one tip that you might give to somebody who's thinking about writing a book, what might you tell them from your experience of 13, 14 years nearly of being a published author?
Yeah, apart from coming to you.
No,
which I would, genuinely, I would recommend.
That's very nice.
I do occasionally promote you on LinkedIn. So now I think it is all about being clear on what your objectives are. Why are you publishing this book? I probably wasn't that clear, apart from I just wanted to publish a book. And I think the evidence says if most business books don't make a lot of money, so hopefully your objective is not, I want to make money from this book. If your objective is, this is a great tool for a market, if you view it as a marketing tool, so it's about promoting yourself or your business or a combination of both. And as we've talked about, it opens doors. It gives you credibility. It's a lovely handout. That each book doesn't cost that much. You can give them away. So it's absolutely a brilliant marketing tool. And then any revenue you make from it, well, that's a bonus. And so I have made money from this book, but if I quantified the time I spent on writing it, it's not been a great investment. No. But I have absolutely no regrets because it's just opened all these doors, and So I think, as I say, the tip is be clear on why you're doing it, and be very careful if it's just to make money. But if it's more, this is a tool to promote my business myself, view it that way, then the revenue's sort of the icing on the cake rather than the core objective.
That's lovely. On that note, I think we will round off our talk. Viewers, listeners, Neil's book is available, The Reluctant Networker, obviously at our website, The Right Book Press, but also Amazon and any of wherever you prefer to buy your books, you can go and get hold of Neil's book. Neil, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for joining us for this Right Book Author Talk. It's really great to have caught up with you. It's so lovely that your book is still going strong after all these years, and that you're still finding it opening all those doors for you. Absolutely delightful. If anybody wants to get hold of you, I guess LinkedIn is probably a good way to do it.
Absolutely, yeah. I'm on LinkedIn. Very happy to chat. Hopefully my passion for networking has come across, and love to just talk about it, help. So please do track me down on LinkedIn. Don't just do I want to connect. Just put a little note as to, I heard your talk on Right Book Company. It'd be great to connect or something like that. Be great. Thank you very much, Sue. Lovely to see you.
Lovely to see you too. Thank you so much, Neil.
Yeah, you're welcome.